We're on the air, Mr. Chair, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the October 13th already hearing of the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission. Please join me in the flag salute. My pleasure.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, let's go ahead, Mr. Villalobos. Could you move forward with items 3 and 4, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, CSB-TV, Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Samaria, and Argot areas. Rebroadcast of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSB-TV, Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Moving on to the roll call. Commissioner Cooney.
Here.
Commissioner Bridley.
Here.
Commissioner Park.
Aye, or here, or present, or something.
Commissioner Blau.
Here.
And Chair Farini.
Here.
And Mr. Chair, before we move on, I just want to make sure that everyone is using the agenda that I sent out at the end of last week. It's the one with 2 consent agenda items and the one with the our next item, actually, which is the reconsider the circumstances of the COVID-19 state of emergency. If anyone needs me to email that to them really quick, just let me know.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Okay. Mr. Wilson, can we go ahead with the agenda status report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. If we could just circle back to item 4, we do need action on that. We put it early in the agenda as it kind of determines how this meeting will continue and future meetings. So we do need the Planning Commission. If you look at item number, there's some findings. Item 2 through 4, and then especially 4 is basically to direct staff to continue to hold remote meetings, and that would carry us through November. And then at the end of November, we'd be checking back in with the Planning Commission to make these findings again for December if necessary. So this is part of those that bill that was just passed. We're doing it today because we're not having a meeting next week on the end of October. So if we could get an action by the Planning Commission on this, we can continue. And that would be, the recommendation of the department is to continue to hold remote hearings. Nothing has changed since the last time we presented this.
Second wasn't so moved.
Commissioner Cooney.
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Villalobos.
Commissioner Cooney.
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Park.
I'm going to vote aye, but I'm really sick of remote meetings, so I hope we do something to change it.
I concur.
32 degrees here.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye.
Chair Farini.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
So, Mr. Wilson, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. In regards to the status of the agenda, as Mr. Villalobos pointed out earlier, there are 2 items on the consent agenda, and then there are 2 items on our standard agenda, the Palama Beach County Park improvements, as well as the appeal of a cannabis project. Staff is ready and prepared to present on both of those items today. I can move to the projection report, Mr. Chair, if you would like.
Yes, please.
As I mentioned earlier, our next hearing would have been scheduled for October 27th. However, at our last meeting, we canceled that. So there are no more meetings in October for the Planning Commission. And then our next hearing would be on November 3rd. And there are 4 items. We continued the ExxonMobil interim trucking project to November 3rd, with directing staff to come back with findings for denial, or recommended findings for denial. And then there are 3 other projects on that date as well. And moving on, we have a hearing on November 10th, an appeal of a cannabis project. And then no other items due to the holidays on November. So we'd return in December 1st for 3 items. We have a project on Turnpike in the Goleta area, residential project. And then we have a cannabis project on that date, as well as an appeal of a parcel map. And then moving on, we have December 8th, we have another appeal of a cannabis operation, and then a development plan and CDP for a cultivation location in the Carpinteria area. And then we're moving over to January 12th. We have another cannabis project scheduled for January 12th in the Carpinteria area as well. There are several items that are not on the projection report as of today, and that is in regards to requests by the Planning Commission for updates regarding housing laws and housing bills, as well as we are tentatively looking at November 10th to add a discussion item related to the coastal resiliency item that we had talked briefly about last week during the director's report. We're trying to finalize those dates with the teams, long-range planning. So I anticipate that we will be able to do that on those dates. And then the housing updates may come later this year and or early next year in regards to that. And then we do have, there is a project in the Santa Maria area, a large freezer project or refrigeration project, Arctic Cold, that we're trying to schedule for later this year. We're still working on dates on that one. So that concludes the projection report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Blau?
Yeah, I just kind of going forward. I do know that the state is pressing everybody to increase densities, trying to get the real numbers in line. One of the things that I know that the city of Santa Maria is doing, and I think we should think about it, is changing our density on projects from 20 units per acre to 30. And what they're doing is they're allowing 30 units per acre on a project, which would give us the ability to control the project. And right now, if someone wants to come in and do a high density project under the state rules, we have no control, and we have to give them 4 different concessions, either setbacks, landscaping, parking, whatever. And we should be thinking about changing our ordinance so that we can allow higher densities but maintain control. So I'm just wondering if you want to think about that going forward and bring us a report sometime in the future.
Mr. Wilson?
Oh, sorry. I just, my apologies, Chair and Commissioner Blau. Thank you for that insight and comments. I think that would be better wrapped up into the housing updates and discussions with long-range planning, and as far as like how we want to approach that. So thank you, Commissioner Blau, for those comments, and I'll pass that on to the teams as far as how to include that discussion in our briefings.
So we'll try to get that agendized, basically, so we can all get some information flowing.
Chair and Commissioner Blau, that is correct. We can add that into our discussion topic.
Excellent.
Wait. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, oh, yes.
It was a last minute hand raise. So Secretary Wilson, was the housing legislation on the Montecito Planning Commission for a briefing, and it's not on today's report? In other words, are you not doing, I thought one of the reasons why we asked for that kind of a session was it was already going to be done for the MPC. Did that change? The AB 910.
Commissioner Bradley, through the chair, we still anticipate having a briefing with the Montecito Planning Commission. As far as dates, we're probably for agenda management purposes, we're looking at dates for that. So it doesn't look like we have it on the calendar right now, but we still anticipate having briefings to both commissions in regards to this.
Okay. I was probably mistaken. Thank you.
Jerry, I just lost something here.
Okay, well, now that I have the new revised agenda, I see what item 4 was that, that I skipped over. Okay, very good. Thank you, Secretary Wilson. And not seeing other hands raised. We'll move on then to public comment. Item 7, Mr. Villalobos, do we have anybody wishing to speak on items not on today's agenda?
Mr. Chair, I didn't have anyone sign up for public comment for this hearing at all yet. Although I do know that we do have a public caller. I suspect they're here for an item on our standard agenda, but I'd just like to give them the opportunity to speak if they want to on this item. So for whoever's joining us via phone, if you could unmute yourself, you have to hit *6 to do so. And just let us know what item you're here to speak on. Again, just hit *6 to unmute yourself. All right, Mr. Chair. I'm not seeing our caller unmute themselves, so maybe this is not the item they wanted to speak on.
Okay, very good. We'll move on to item 8, then Planning and Commissioners Informational Reports. Commissioner Park, I would like an update on your situation up there, if you'd be so willing.
Oh. Can I just talk? I can't find my cursor to do the raise hand.
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Well, the fire is behind me and it's on the other side of that ridge, and it appears to have be quiet right now. It was yesterday afternoon getting right near the top. So we'll just have to see where it heads and where the wind goes. And meanwhile, I'm a little concerned about the rerouting of 101 traffic up through the valley, because it's turned the valley into a big parking lot, which makes it the idea of moving horse trailers and all that out of here be just nearly impossible. So my puppies will be evacuated by horseback if it has to happen. But that's the deal.
Okay.
While I have the floor, could I speak to something else? We're still setting up workshops to landowner groups and other public groups on the countywide recreation master plan. They're workshops that I moderate. They're sponsored by various organizations, and the Grower Shippers Association in Santa Maria will be sponsoring one that we'll be having at 11:30 in the morning on October 26th. And we'll be having one a day or two earlier, and I'm forgetting the exact date, sorry about that, at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, and that will be for first and second district projects and ideas. So I hope folks are able to make it to those. That'll be an early evening one. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Park. Okay, Director Plowman, Director's Report.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hope you're all well. I don't have a lot to report today because not a lot has happened in the last week, but I can let you know that the board did hear Key Site 3 yesterday. They ultimately decided to continue the item and gave direction to the applicant to work to see if they can obtain an easement across Oak Brook. And so they can change their secondary access to that road rather than, oh my God, I'm going to blank on the name. Jenna, can you help me out?
Chancellor.
Chancellor, thank you. I was going to say Chamberlain. Chancellor. So, yeah, so the applicant said there, I mean, I think that was something that they had offered, is that they would try and work that out, but the board has essentially said that that needs to be the secondary access if the project's going to go forward. And we don't have a date certain of when that will come back, because it will likely take some time for that to be worked out. In terms of, Mr. Wilson noted that we're going to be scheduling those items to come back to talk to the commission, the housing element updates, and we're looking at dates in November to do that. We haven't settled on them just yet, as he mentioned, but we'll make sure we're going to give you the information that you need. And we'll have staff available to answer questions that you have either regarding housing or sea level rise. There has been a change in the appeal of the Biennicito cannabis application appeal hearing that was scheduled for the 19th of October. It has now been continued to December 14th, and that was a request of the applicant. The appellant had submitted additional materials and they wanted more time to be able to respond to them before coming to the hearing. The other items that are coming up at the board are the appeal of the ADU in Isla Vista. That's the Williams ADU, and that's on November 2nd. And then, as I mentioned last time, we are going to have just a quick briefing to the Board of Supervisors on the status of the safety element update. And that's updating them on that first phase, which is the climate change vulnerability assessment. There's no action, it's just a receive and file update for them. Oasis will be heard on December 7th. And then we have the Santa Barbara Ranch periodic review appeal on the 14th of December. And I think that's all I have today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Blau. Dan, you're muted.
So Director Plummer, did you say Oasis December 7th?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, and that's and then we're done. They're done. Is that right? If they.
So, yeah, Commissioner Blau through the chair, they need to be wrapped up by the end of the year, is my understanding. And so we have it on December 7th. If there's some need to continue it for any reason, we have the 14th date. But the goal is to have that completed by the end of the year.
That'd be great. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Commissioner Park.
I would like to ask a question, but I don't think you'd want to answer it right now or maybe ever. But it's I just want to know how P&D is doing just in general. It's been a stressful year, all sorts of projects, and they get scheduled this way and that way, and ordinances come up, and it just seems like everybody in all directions is pushing P&D pretty hard, and you've had a lot of turnover. It's just kind of goes with the flow with COVID and all this and that. And I would just like to have a positive, constructive discussion maybe in December of just how everybody's doing, and if there's anything that we can do that would make it easier on you. So there you go.
Commissioner Park through the chair, I appreciate the inquiry and the sentiment. I think it has been a challenging year and a half, and we are down some staff right now. We're going to be recruiting for an assistant director here very shortly, as Mr. Steve Mason retired, and so we do have some attrition in development review. So yeah, it hasn't been an easy time, but I'm happy to
maybe put something on the agenda so we can talk about it in more detail if necessary. But I appreciate the concern.
Okay, thank you, Director Plowman.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item 10 then. That'll be the consent agenda. And we have items C1 and C2. Does anyone see a need to pull those and discuss, or can we move on with the consent vote? Not seeing any hands raised. Let's move on to a vote. Mr. Villalobos.
Well, I think you need a motion to approve the two items. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
Okay, well, now I have two hands up.
I know.
Commissioner Lee?
I was just gonna second, so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, Mr. Villalobos.
And just for the record, I didn't have anyone sign up for public comment for the consent items either.
All right.
Commissioner Cooney,
Just a question, Mr. Villalobos, do you have to read those into the record?
Yes.
You know, this is Commissioner Blau. I wonder, we need to do that. I sit there and I watch the board hearings all the time. They don't do that. If it's a consent agenda item, unless one of the supervisors or someone from the public wants to comment, they just vote on 26 of them at one time. They don't read them into the record. Just saying, I don't care how you want to do it, but I'd like to be efficient and be consistent with the way the county does things.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to do either, but I defer to council on that.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I don't think you have to read them into the record. I think it's at the discretion of the chair.
Okay. Well, okay. Let's go ahead with the vote then.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Blau,
Aye.
Chair Farini.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0 for both items.
Okay, now for the standard agenda. Mr. Villalobos, would you read item 1 and 2, please?
Certainly. The following is a hearing on the request of the Santa Barbara County Community Services Department, Parks Division, to consider case number 16 DVP 17, 17 CUP 46, 16 CDP 16, and to adopt the mitigated negative declaration 19 NGD 12 pursuant to the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Planning commissioners, any site visits or ex parte to report? Commissioner Bradley?
I had a delightful site visit, and I even dragged my surfing husband up to Halama County Park, and I had a couple conversations with staff, including Jill Van Ree and Sean Stewart. So that was it. And site visit was on Sunday, and that's it. No other discussions.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Not seeing any other hands raised, we can move on to the staff presentation.
Good morning, Chair Farini and Commissioners. Sean Stewart, Staff Planner, speaking for the Halama Beach County Park Improvements Project. This project includes 3 permit types: a development plan, conditional use permit, and coastal development permit. Additionally, a mitigated negative declaration was prepared to study the environmental effects of the project.
If we could have our CSBTV staff pull up the presentation, that'd be great. Thanks so much.
All right, moving on. Halama is a polarizing place. You either know it and love it or don't have a clue where it's located and may have trouble pronouncing its name. As shown on the map, the park is located along the coast, approximately halfway between Point Arguello and Point Conception. The park is accessed via Halama Road, which connects State Highway 1 to the coast. The turnoff to Halama Road from Highway 1 is approximately 5 miles south of Lompoc. And the park is nestled in the hills along the coast, bounded to the north by Halama Creek and Vandenberg Air Force Base, to the south by the Dangermont Preserve, to the west by Halama Beach and the Pacific Ocean, and to the east by the Union Pacific Railroad and the Dangermont Preserve. The park was formed in 1943 when its land was donated to the county and is pretty much built out these days. The park includes 117 campsites, 105 day-use parking spaces, a general store, park office, rangers' quarters, and maintenance buildings. The park is one of only 4 remaining areas along the county's north coast that provides public access and recreation. In addition to camping, the park is popular for surfing, beach walking, fishing, swimming, picnicking, and bird watching. The project is a request on the behalf of County Parks Division for a final development plan to validate the park's existing as-built development, as well as incorporating the current proposed improvements therein. The project also includes a conditional use permit to operate the portion of the campground located on ag zone land. And regarding the proposed development, the project would replace the 5 existing restrooms with approximate like-for-like comparisons and continue to utilize the existing structure locations. There is a 140 square foot addition to the existing shower facility that would accommodate 3 new stalls, including an ADA stall. Of note, the new bathrooms would also provide ADA accommodations, and a roof-mounted solar thermal collection system is also proposed for the expanded shower facility. 4 new RV cabins are proposed, but because those are on wheels and under the Department of Transportation jurisdiction, your commission will only act upon the infrastructure improvements necessary to support the placement of the new RV cabins. That includes grading, paving, utilities, and landscaping to prepare the site. 4 existing RV sites will be reclassified as hybrid RV tent sites to support both uses, but will undergo no physical change. And 1 of the park's group sites will be relocated within the park's existing boundaries. A 17-panel solar system is proposed for the roof of the existing workshop building and will tie into the park's existing electrical system. The project's grading figures will total 530 cubic yards of cut, 380 cubic yards of import, and 950 cubic yards of fill. And there will be no net change to the park's existing day-use parking. I will now walk you through the site plan to cover what was just discussed. Firstly, this site plan reflects the park's boundaries, which constitute the scope of the final development plan. Next, I'll highlight the parcel boundary between the 2 parcels that comprise the park. To the right is the portion of the park located on ag zone land, which triggers the CUP requirement. Next, I've highlighted the 5 restrooms to be replaced. Shown here is the shower facility and the roof-mounted thermal collection system. Here is the proposed site of the 4 new RV cabins. Site work here includes grading, utility installation, paving, and landscaping. And the existing group campsite in this area will be relocated here to replace 4 existing individual tent sites. Here are the 4 RV sites, which will support both RV and tent use moving forward. And here's the location of the roof-mounted solar on an existing workshop building. Shown here are the restroom elevations. This project is exempt from BAR since it's a county project, but it did go for advisory comments, which resulted in the sky blue color of the restrooms you see here. Shown here is a photo of existing RV cabins at the park to give you an idea of how the additional cabins will look. A mitigated negative declaration was prepared for the project to study its anticipated environmental effects. No significant and unavoidable impacts were found to occur, but less than significant with mitigation impacts were found for 8 resource areas. Those resource areas include aesthetics, biological, cultural, geologic, hazardous materials, noise, public facilities, transportation, and water resources. The majority of the project's mitigation measures consist of standard best practice construction measures. However, there were a few individually crafted mitigation measures, primarily related to cultural and biological resources. Less than significant impacts were found for the remaining resource areas, and included in staff's recommended action for today will be direction to certify the project's environmental document. As described in the staff report for the project is consistent with all applicable Gaviota Coast Plan and Coastal Land Use Plan policies. For instance, the project is consistent with policies. For instance, the project is consistent with policies calling for the protection of agricultural and prime soils because recreation, such as camping, is another priority use under the Coastal Act. The project would avoid prime soils, and the park's usage does not conflict with any adjacent or nearby agricultural operations. The project is consistent with biological resource policies because a site-specific bioanalysis has been prepared for the project, and as such, development avoids on-site resources and complies with buffer policies for wildlife-sensitive habitats and vegetation, such as wetlands and Halama Creek. The project is consistent with cultural resource policies because mitigation measures have been placed on the project that avoid and protect cultural resources to the maximum extent feasible. The project is consistent with recreational policies because the park offers low-cost public access and coastal recreation opportunity along the county's north coast, which has limited coastal access. The proposed hybrid RV tent site approach will ensure that there is no loss of tent camping in the park, which is important given that tent camping typically has the lowest cost barrier to entry. Lastly, the project is consistent with water resource policies due to the development setbacks from water resources and construction requirements placed on the project via conditions of approval or mitigation measures that will prevent sedimentation and other potential harmful pollutants from ever reaching water bodies. The project is also consistent with the coastal zoning ordinance, given that campgrounds are an allowable use in the recreation district. And with the approval of the project, the park would be in compliance with its development plan and CUP requirement. And additionally, the project complies with height and setback requirements. In addition to the information presented, I would also like to point out that all of the project's findings are able to be made, and therefore staff recommends that your commission follow the procedures outlined in this slide and approve the project. This concludes my presentation, and in closing, I would like to point out that Jill Van Wee, representing Parks Division, and Todd Morrison, representing General Services, is here today representing the applicant team, and I'm now available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Nice presentation. I don't know why all of a sudden I'm craving a cheeseburger, but there may have been some subliminal messaging in there. Any commissioners have questions? Commissioner Bradley.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart did a great job of walking me through a couple other questions, but there was one I forgot to ask, and that was, I noticed that the C-bar comments that you have as attachment D to the staff report, it asked, did I get this right? They were concerned about the color, and I thought it was the blue color they were concerned about. They wanted a more earth tone thing, and they suggested that it come back if that wasn't pursued. So Mr. Stewart, can you narrate that for me a little bit on the restroom buildings?
Yes, Commissioner Bradley, through the chair. The original restroom color was a much darker blue, similar to a navy blue. And as a result of the CBAR's comments, the darkness of the blue was lessened to the sky blue color, which was determined to be more earth tone as you're looking out towards the ocean.
Okay, so in your opinion, it doesn't really need to go back to CBAR for any reason. That's kind of all gotten worked out based on that feedback.
Commissioner Bradley, through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, thanks so much. That's it.
Commissioner Park. You're muted.
There you go. To follow up on your cheeseburger comment, I think the real question for any project at Halama is what's my friend Don Eitram think of it? And I'm sure Don does approve this. And I support the project. I think that Parks knows what it wants and has worked all out. One thing though, I just wondered when I was reading the staff report, is there were several references to things being as built. And I'm not sure what part was as built and why do it that way as opposed to just bring us the project before it was built out or any parts were. So could you address that, Mr. Stewart?
Commissioner Park, through the chair, the as-built reference refers to existing development. So the proposed development that I walked you through in the project description regarding the bathrooms to be replaced, shower addition, and the infrastructure improvements for the proposed RV cabins, that's going to be the current proposed development. And then as built is just referring to all existing development. And together, those two components will comprise what is the final development plan.
So the changes aren't as built, it's just sort of what's already out there is what's shown as built for permit purposes. Okay, I get it, thanks.
Okay, very good. Mr. Villalobos, do we have any public comment?
Mr. Chair, we do have one speaker, Mark Shatillo.
Good. Mr. Shatillo.
Well, good morning, Chair Farini, members of the board, or of the commission, excuse me. This is Mark Shatillo, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Gaviota Coast Conservancy. The Conservancy is involved in all things Gaviota Coast, and Halama is an important resource for the community, and GCC supports Parks Department's efforts here to modernize and update the Halama campground. There's a couple of things I just want to mention. One is the Shumash significance of this site. I appreciate very much the reference in the staff report to Ms. Stensley that has been involved, Tuamite Stensley, and that's very important. We would also call attention to staff and the county generally to be mindful of the descendants of a particular area. It was Indigenous Peoples Day earlier this week, and the lands that we're on are actually lands that were the Shumash territory. There's been no formal ceding of those lands, so we're sharing those lands with the Shumash people. And it's important to recognize, in our view, the people who are currently in our community that have ancestral ties to these lands, because their voice is really the most significant one for purposes of determining what's appropriate. Just like under state law, when a body is found that may be of Shumash or of Native American origin, the most likely descendant is the person who the coroner contacts. And we think that it's important to reference that descendancy as you're doing consultation with respect to projects like this. The other comment I wanted to make is the continuing use of the fiction of RV cabins. This is somewhat of an unfortunate precedent in our view, where a loophole within the coastal zoning ordinance allows the creation of what is essentially a permanent structure. But because of the fiction that it is, quote, on wheels, it isn't necessarily subject to all of the same land use constraints. We don't have any specific objections to this project, but similarly, we want to flag that to county staff and to the commission as an area of concern. These RV cabins include hard utility connections to septic, to water, and to electrical. And so they're not mobile. The fact that there are tires is really just a waste of the rubber that is there. These are not ever going to be moved. And while this may be a fiction of the or a result of the coastal zoning ordinance, it is something that concerns us, particularly when we have the siting of these RV cabins in sensitive habitat or within buffer areas where a permanent structure would not be appropriate. With those comments, we categorically support the Parks Department and this project. The other piece that I want to add for the commission and staff's consideration is the next step of this. Recall that 26 acres of land were donated to the county as part of the settlement in the Dangermond coastal violations. Those lands are not subject of this action, but we want to encourage the Parks Department to move with alacrity to expand the park, to move the kiosk further up so that we can have better parking along the access road and better access to the surf break, which is a very popular location, and it's an area of considerable frustration for many decades as the sheriff would periodically ticket people for being on what was then part of Bixby Ranch. Today it's not. Today it's owned by the county, and we think it particularly important that the county redefine the exterior boundary of the park, relocate the kiosk, and enable public parking within those areas without risk of ticket or citation. Mr. Chair, thank you for allowing me to go on a little bit, and we very much support the project and appreciate the county's work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shatillo. Does staff have anything to add that was interesting about the additional acreage Mr. Shatillo brought up?
Chair Farini, nothing further from staff.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Farini, this is Jill Van Wee with CSD Parks.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's get Ms. Van Wee.
And that was a great comment from Mark Shatillo. I just wanted to let you know that we actually have we're funded by the Coastal Conservancy to do a master plan that incorporates that additional land from the Dangermond Preserve. And we have the California or the violation funds. We have $100,000 that's going to the design and permitting for coastal access. So to kind of keep a natural put a natural trail in from Halama Beach Park to what quote unquote the crack, and build a little bit a little safer trail / small stairway down to the beach there. And also look at parking and relocating that kiosk. So it is on our a planning radar, and we're in action on that.
Okay, thank you. So no further questions by the commission. Okay, and we can close the public hearing. Move on to discussion or deliberations of the commission. Commissioner Blau.
Yeah, I very much would support the project. My only frustration, to tell you the truth, is it's just not big enough. I own a big motorhome, frequent RV camper, whatever. My biggest frustration is finding a place to go. You can't imagine, if you don't make a reservation 6 months in advance, you're not likely to find any place to go park and go camping or recreate. I mean, I'm fortunate I'm going to Buellton next week. I got Monday through Thursday. Forget the weekends, that's not going to happen. And I, with a couple of friends, I got the last 3 parking spots in the entire park. Come on. I mean, it's the middle of, this is not a holiday deal. So if they've got more land that they can acquire and make the park bigger, God bless them, do it. I mean, I would be happy if it was 100 acres that they could add to it and add, a couple hundred, camping sites, to tell you the truth. So just to say that we don't have enough camping facilities, RV facilities, and the more we can do, the better off we'll be. So we're going to support the project.
Very good. Commissioner Park?
I wanted to, one thing, just express my support for the project, because I think there's some things that have been cleverly thought out, and I appreciate that by Parks. With reference to Commissioner Blau's comments, I agree with him. We need all the camping spots we can get, and we've got some wonderful county parks that have camping, and there's throngs of people waiting to get in there. One thing we should all realize, though, and I've learned this even more so working with Parks Department on that rec master plan, is our Parks Department is stretched really thin personnel-wise. And if we want more real estate for them to manage, we also need to make sure their budget includes having more people. That's just something to think about. And finally, I'd like to address the comments that Mr. Chichilla made on the use of the RV cabins. I think he has an interesting point that maybe they should be reviewed for environmental purposes the same way a more permanent structure is. I don't know. That's an interesting point of discussion. But as far as them being mobile and is that being a ruse and so forth, I do disagree with him. They are extremely mobile. We've gone through this issue of what they are and how they're used in a number of ordinances. We're addressing it now in the ag tourism ordinances. What is ag touring now called? Whatever it's now called, and the farm stay. And we addressed it a lot when we discussed the ag employee dwelling unit. What's nice about those things, they're often called RV mods throughout the company, or rather park mods throughout the country, is they're inspected for the building code purposes. It's by HUD when they leave the factory. They are on wheels. You can wheel them in one day and wheel them out the next, and that's pretty useful in a lot of ways. They're not permanent structures. So I think that they're well thought out here. I reserve any comment on what should happen in terms of environmental analysis, but I don't want anyone to be disparaging their use by our Parks Department. The Parks Department has used them at Kachuma and Halama with some real success. Thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Bradley?
Well, as I said, I did a great site visit, and my husband used to drive up there to surf. And the standard then, before the Parks Department signed the incoming lane, no parking, is that people would be, hungry, young, and cheap and wanted to surf. So they'd park their trucks along the side and then clamber down that hill with a surfboard. I don't know how they all didn't die, but that's surfers. So the concept, partially responding to what Mr. Chichilla brought up, the concept of moving the kiosk up that driveway, I don't really know what that's going to do. If the goal is to get more day use parking, maybe that can be looked at. I know it's a later effort. It's a master plan. It's not today's thing, but I think that actually the queuing is intense, and I've been up there before in the summer, and it's very intense. But why not put it on a very narrow lane that can't be expanded, and you wouldn't want to have parking on that lane anyway? So I'm a little bit confused about that. Secondly, I completely do not concur with Mr. Chichillo about the more permanent structure definition for these RV, these little units. We're moving into that direction for not just, modular housing for single family lots, but also affordable housing and tiny homes that are going to be part of a homeless camp that moves around the county. We've already done that. So I think this is a great solution to provide park spaces with something that's a little bit more amenable if you don't happen to have an RV. And therefore, I really think that the way that County Parks has done this, and I really want to give a shout out to Mr. Stewart and planning staff because it was a great report. Took a long time to get here because of staff shortages, I think, in all departments. And I'm very pleased with the whole thing. I think it's going to be great for the public, and it's going to be, it still is a jewel. And I can't wait to go back and get a halama burger. Thank you, Mr. Stewart, for putting in the halama burger. We know how to get to his heart is through a halama burger. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cooney.
These are all very positive comments, and I approached the staff report with some skepticism that it was going to be too commercial and actually be to the detriment of the coastal resources. I have, through the work of county parks and our staff to bring this to us in a very organized and clear fashion, changed my view that this is going to be beneficial in terms of access to the coast, that not everyone can afford to go and stay overnight. It's really going to be a special place to go, and I don't think it'll be lost simply because the facilities are better and more visitor serving. So glad to see it coming before us, and appreciate the sharing with us of all the details. So I'm prepared to vote in favor.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooney. Okay, can we get a motion?
One more comment, if I could.
Okay.
There's some concern about the money for the Parks Department. Let me tell you what, the more of these you can do, the bigger you can make it, the better off you're going to be. I'm now paying $145 a night for a parking spot for my RV site. And a year ago it was $55. It's kind of like, hello. And I get the fact that the current trends to be, 2/3 of the park is for big motorhomes, which we're paying big money for, and 1/3 of the site is for tent camping, which is, $10, $15 a night. So I think this is just one great thing that we should be going forward. And I agree with Commissioner Ridley that Mr. Chatilla's comments about the mobile ability of the other cabins is not true. I mean, that's one motorhome is several $100,000. You could rent a really nice cabin for a couple $100 a night, and it really is affordable. Yes, they are mobile. They do move them around. They don't usually last more than 10, 15 years, and they replace them with something different. So I think this is just such a great project for everyone to use.
Thank you. Commissioner Park.
I feel I'm in Commissioner Blau's office, but just a quick follow-up on Commissioner Cooney's statements about this being a public access site and not being so terribly commercial. And I want to elaborate on that. Years ago, maybe I should have disclosed this. I don't know. I've represented for years Don and Kathy Eitram, who invented the Halama Burger and had the Halama store, and their family still does. And we dealt all the time with Michael Pejos, who I'm sure Commissioner Cooney remembers, and probably most of you on the call don't anymore, but he was our very thought-provoking, hardworking, controversial parks director. and Mike was super proud of Halama Beach because he felt it was a place the whole public could access, one of the most wonderful sites of the world. And one reason that we always got our concession renewed is he said, on foggy days and rainy nights and this and that, we just got to have somebody out there who provides supplies for the campers. And that's just the way he always looked at it. That's the way sort of the culture of the Parks Department has looked at Halama, and it's always supported just what Commissioner Cooney has suggested is important. And with that, I do want to make a motion to approve the project and adopt all of the recommendations made by staff in the staff report.
Well, I would second that wholeheartedly.
Okay, Commissioner Cooney had his hand up first, though.
Oh, really? It looks like we're
Yes,
both
he
at the
did.
same time. Okay.
So let's see what he has to say.
He doesn't have 8 surfboards in his garage.
Oh, okay.
I appreciate that some of my fellow commissioners don't respect the raised hand feature and just go ahead and Commissioner Bradley, I would never think of outranking you. So your second should stand.
Okay.
Thank you.
With that, we're ready for a vote, Mr. Villalobos.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
You're muted, Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Blau,
Aye.
and Chair Farini.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. What I'd like to do now is read the next item into the record, and then we'll take a 10-minute break and come back to that. So, Mr. Villalobos.
The following is a hearing on the request of Catherine and William Hames, appellant, to consider case number 21 APL 34, an appeal of the approval of land use permit case number 19 LUP 126 by the Director of the Planning and Development Department.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Okay, let's all reconvene here at 10 minutes after 10.
Thank you.
Chair, we're back on the air whenever you're ready to begin the next item.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Mr. Villalobos, you had mentioned that we have a late item. Could you go over that, please? Discuss that with the commission.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the applicant, the agent for the applicant submitted some material regarding the well 2 production and sustainability, as well as there was an exhibit to that as well. So that was submitted after the deadline today. So I emailed that to you, the commission, and posted it online shortly after 8 o'clock this morning. So if the commission would like to include that as part of its record, it just needs to vote that in. And I wanted to just make sure we brought that up in case the commission opts not to, so the applicant could perhaps verbally make that part of their presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a concern about documents being submitted to us at the last minute in the absence of testimony that that could introduce the same subject and provide response to questions from the commission. So I think it's a disadvantage for the appellants to have to react to something particularly important at the last minute. So I hesitate to allow this document in the absence of direct testimony, which would account for the same thing. In particular, the letter from the hydrogeologist.
I share your concerns and views. So let's see what Commissioner Blau says.
I totally agree. I haven't read the document, didn't look at it. I wouldn't. It's rare for me to ever vote to put something into the record that's beyond the deadline for submission. So I would not support it at all.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Blau. And Commissioner Park?
I join with the rest of you on this, and I want to just describe a practical reason that supports why we have this attitude. You know, if let's say I'm an attorney representing the appellant, you know, I'm gonna prepare for what I see, but something that as late as this, I personally haven't read it. I don't even know when I ever will read it, and I hate the idea of it kind of sneaking into the record and being there. If at least it's there by way of public testimony or in their presentation, then the appellant and the appellant's attorney can hear it. They at least can respond to it, and they can think to themselves, well, do I respond to it now? Or maybe I respond to it in part and I say, well, you brought in something pretty important. I want to continue the hearing so I have time to deal with it. So I think anything this late really shouldn't be in our record unless it's presented at the hearing, and then folks can deal with it more appropriately. Thank you.
Okay, so there will not be a motion to accept the late minutes is what I'm seeing. And I think that's good. Mr. Villalobos caught that early and made the applicant aware. Okay, let's move on then to the commissioner's site visit and ex parte. I will report that I did do a site visit and was joined by fellow Commissioner Park at the site where we met with Mr. Hines and his planner, Miss Macon. Commissioner Park?
Yes, I'd like to report the same site visit, and I'm glad you remembered exactly when it was, because I don't. But and so we met with Bubba Hines and planner Ray Macon, and I've had a couple of phone conversations with Ms. Macon as well. And then also I had a tour of the site several months ago from Billy Hines. It was actually related to another project, but he gave me a tour of this site, and I spoke with him about the project.
Thank you, Commissioner Park. Commissioner Brightly.
Well, I had a conversation with the appellants, Mr. and Mrs. Haynes, at actually a mutual friend's dinner party back in September. I think it was September 25th. It was before I saw any of the application material, however, so it was a pretty general conversation. And then I had just a call quickly with Guillory Macon, the agent for the applicants this week on Thursday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, looks like we're ready to move forward with the staff presentation. Ms. Vosberg, good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Do I need to wait 1 minute to get the slides? There we go. So good morning, Chair Farini and members of the commission. Today I'll be presenting case number 21, APL 23, a request by Catherine and William Hames to consider the appeal of the approval of case number 19 LUP 126, a land use permit for the SBGL cannabis cultivation project. Next slide. So as shown on this vicinity map, the project is located on a 98.7 acre property on the southwest side of the Mill Road Highway 246 intersection, approximately 5 miles west of Buellton and 9 miles east of Lompoc. The property is located in the Ag 200 zone district and is surrounded on all sides by properties also zoned Ag 200. The site currently supports a 30-acre vineyard operation, and surrounding land uses include irrigated crops, vineyards, grazing, and rural home sites. The nearest residentially zoned area relative to the site is located in the city of Buellton, approximately 5 miles east, and the nearest EDRN, existing developed rural neighborhood, is the North Highway 246 EDRN, approximately 3 miles to the east. Next slide. So this project was approved by staff under a land use permit on July 2nd, 2021, and it was then appealed by Catherine and William Hames on July 12th, 2021. Next slide. This project is a commercial cannabis cultivation operation that includes 3.5 acres of outdoor or mature plant cannabis cultivation, 4,620 square feet of mixed light cannabis cultivation in 1 existing greenhouse and 1 proposed greenhouse, 3,600 square feet of indoor cannabis cultivation and 1,200 square feet of indoor cannabis nursery in an existing metal agricultural structure, and then 5,552 square feet of cannabis processing in 2 existing dwellings and 1 existing storage barn, which are to be converted to processing buildings under the scope of this project. So the outdoor cannabis cultivation area will be grown uncovered without hoop structures and will be harvested only once per year for a maximum duration of 3 weeks per harvest. Cannabis harvested from the outdoor field will be immediately transferred to the on-site processing buildings or immediately transferred off-site for processing the same day it's harvested. And all on-site cannabis processing activities will occur within the enclosed processing buildings, which will be equipped with carbon filter odor abatement systems. And then additional site improvements under the scope of the project include 10 5,000-gallon fire protection water storage tanks, a 15,800 square foot ground-mounted solar installation, a culvert drainage crossing, and then installation of fencing, lighting, and landscape screening. Next slide. So this slide depicts an overall site plan for the project on the left, and then a detail of the development area on the right. So you can see the 3.5 acre outdoor cannabis cultivation area is highlighted in green. The greenhouses for mixed light cannabis cultivation are highlighted in yellow. The indoor grow and nursery building is highlighted in orange. And then the processing buildings are highlighted in magenta. And then additionally, the 10 5,000-gallon water storage tanks are highlighted in blue, and the new solar system is highlighted in red. Next slide. So a timely appeal of the director's approval was filed on July 12, 2021 during the 10-day appeal period. And the appellant identified 5 overall issues as the basis of their appeal. Number 1 was the lack of CEQA review. 2, inadequate consideration of fire safety hazards. 3, inadequate consideration of water usage and depletion of the aquifer. 4, inadequate consideration of odor impacts. And then 5, inadequate consideration of its aesthetic impacts associated with the solar panels. Next slide. So I'll go through an overview of each of the appeal items and staff's response, which are addressed in full in the staff report. So for appeal issue 1, the appellant asserts that the permit approval makes no mention of any CEQA review and states the project impacts must be evaluated under CEQA. In response, staff finds, as demonstrated in attachment D to the staff report, staff completed a written checklist which documented the project specific evaluation of the project site and determined that environmental effects of the project were covered in the programmatic environmental impact report for the Cannabis Land Use Ordinance and Licensing Program. And in doing so, the project was adequately analyzed under CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15168, and no subsequent environmental review is required pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15162. Next slide. So for appeal issue 2, the appellant asserts approval of the project failed to adequately consider fire safety hazards posed by increased traffic on Mail Road as a result of the project. In response, staff finds the proposed operation is limited to 7 year-round full-time employees and a maximum of 3 additional seasonal employees who will only be on site a maximum of 3 weeks per year during the harvest of the outdoor area. And as demonstrated in sections 6.3 and 6.4 of the staff report, the project was approved in compliance with all policies and regulations of the Land Use and Development Code and the Comprehensive Plan pertaining to adequate services and transportation, and no increased fire safety hazard was identified as a result of the project. The project was reviewed by the County Public Works Department, Transportation Division, and the existing roads providing access to the project site were determined to be adequate to support the project traffic. And County Fire also reviewed the project and did not identify any conditions on the land use permit or concerns pertaining to increased fire safety hazard as a result of the project. Next slide. For appeal issue 3, the appellant asserts approval of the project failed to adequately consider increased water demand and the resulting impacts on the local aquifer. In response, staff finds, as demonstrated in sections 6.3 and 6.4 of the staff report, the project was approved in compliance with all policies and regulations of the LUDC and comprehensive plan pertaining to groundwater resources. And additionally, the net new water use for the project is well below the established threshold of significance for the Buellton groundwater basin. And as such, it was determined the project will not result in any groundwater basin becoming seriously overdrafted or prolonged on a prolonged basis or lead to a substantial overcommitment of any groundwater basin. Next slide. For appeal issue 4, the appellant asserts approval of the project failed to adequately consider odor impacts and mitigate odor generated as a result of the project. In response, staff finds, again, as demonstrated in section 3 and 6.4 of the staff report, the project was approved in compliance with all policies and regulations of the LUDC and comprehensive plan pertaining to odor abatement. And is demonstrated in the project description and in the applicant's odor abatement exhibit. The outdoor cannabis cultivation will be limited again to 1 harvest per year for a maximum duration of 3 weeks per harvest. Cannabis harvested from the outdoor cannabis cultivation area will be immediately transferred to the on-site processing buildings or off-site for processing the same day it's harvested. And all on-site cannabis processing activities will occur within the enclosed processing buildings, which will be equipped with carbon filter odor abatement systems. Next slide. For appeal issue 5, the appellant states the ground-mounted solar panels will be visible from the Haynes residence, and approval of the project failed to adequately consider the aesthetic impact of the solar installation. In response, staff finds, as demonstrated in section 6.3 and 6.4 of the staff report, the project was approved in compliance with all policies and regulations of the LUDC and comprehensive plan pertaining to visual resources. However, there are no policies or regulations in the LUDC or comprehensive plan that protect private views. And furthermore, the solar energy systems are exempt from design review and do not require planning permit approval. Next slide. So 2 days ago, on October 11th, the appellant submitted an additional 119-page supplemental package that identified 3 additional points to add to the basis of their appeal. Staff reviewed the supplemental package and found the information included does not change the project findings or staff's recommendation on the project. So going through each briefly, in the first point, the appellant cites a 2019 pilot study analyzing VOC emissions and a cannabis environmental best management practices guide for the city of Denver to assert that new studies show cannabis produces significantly more biogenic VOCs and has a larger impact on ozone pollution than previously understood. And the appellant also cites fluctuation in Santa Barbara County's air quality attainment status and asserts that the change in status constitutes a substantial change with respect to the circumstances under which the PEIR was drafted. So in response, staff finds the presence of cannabis biogenic VOCs was known and discussed in the PEIR. The fact that VOCs and NOx are precursors to ozone was known and discussed in the PEIR. And the PEIR concluded that both emissions from operations of cannabis activities and objectionable odors were class 1 significant and unavoidable impacts. Additionally, this topic was discussed at length during the August 20th, 2019 Board of Supervisors hearing. And as explained by Dr. Biswete during the board hearing, the same model which demonstrated cannabis biogenic VOCs can contribute to substantial formation of ozone in the city of Denver also showed that by incorporating the meteorological variables and atmospheric conditions in Santa Barbara County, cannabis biogenic VOCs are not expected to contribute to this substantial formation of ozone. The PEIR also anticipated that the county would remain in non-attainment and concluded that the project's contribution to cumulative air quality would be significant and unavoidable. Fluctuations in the attainment classification do not constitute new information, showing that the project will have different or more significant effects on the environment than those examined in the PEIR. And then for the second point of the supplemental package, the appellant cites the landscape screening plan requirement for the cannabis ordinance to assert that the project is inconsistent with the LUDC and that it fails to screen the solar panels. Again, staff finds the solar installation is exempt from design review and planning permit approval under the LUDC. And then finally, in the third point, the appellant asserts that evidence does not establish that there is sufficient water on site to sustain the project. In response, staff reviewed the hydrogeologist's water well completion report for the subject well, and the report demonstrates that the on-site water supply is adequate to support the future water demand of the property under the proposed project. Next slide. So with that, staff recommends the commission deny the appeal, make the required findings for approval of the project, including CEQA findings, determine that the previously certified PEIR is adequate and no subsequent environmental reviews required. And finally, grant de novo approval of the project, case number 19 LUP 126, subject to the conditions of approval. And that completes staff's presentation, and we are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bosberg, for a very thorough and interesting report. That was very helpful for me. I did have one question, and it's kind of a sidebar, I think. But on the solar energy system arrays that are being put on the property, and it's identified as exempt under the LUDC, is there a size limit which triggers a different permitting path?
To my knowledge, there is not. The LUDC identifies solar energy systems, private use solar energy systems, as being exempt from planning permit requirements. So they do still need to be permitted through building and safety, but we just can't consider them under our review.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bradley.
A couple questions. I didn't see a transportation letter in there. So that means that county transportation looked at this and presumed, as you summarized, that there was no meaningful addition of traffic, and so they would not require a development impact fee. Is that true? I mean, that's probably how some of the smaller cannabis cases are evaluated, right?
Commissioner Bradley, through the chair. Yeah, that is correct. We, on land use permits, we often don't get an actual condition letter when there are no comments or conditions.
Okay. But if it was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we have, email communication that states that there's no concerns and that the existing roads are adequate, but we don't have an actual condition letter.
But on things that are an LUP, if there was a sufficient size grow or a traffic safety concern or a site distance concern, they would actually do that to you and there would be a condition letter in your LUP.
Yeah, I believe that, for a land use permit, if there were significant concerns requiring conditions, that we may receive a condition letter.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then the hydrogeologist report that you said you reviewed and referenced, did that include the Monday submittal, or was that the preceding documentation?
It was a different document. Same effect, but it was a different document than what was submitted on Monday.
Okay. And one last question is, I think I'm reading the project description to be that they're removing all of the residential functions on the farm, so there won't be an on-site residence as part of the project description. Is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner Bradley, through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you. Nice report, by the way.
Thank you. Commissioner Blau. You're muted, Dan.
Ms. Fosberg, thank you. Okay. In relation to the solar panels, I understand that we don't have the authority under ordinances to regulate that, but correct me if I'm wrong, and this may be a question for county council, we don't have the right to do that under state law. I mean, if I want to put the solar panels in my front yard, in plain view of the street view, there is no ability for the county to regulate that or prevent that. Am I correct?
Commissioner Blau, through the chair, I believe that is accurate. That is my general understanding, but I cannot personally name the state requirement. So if county council can weigh in, by all means.
There we are, Ms. Kim. There you go.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Freeney, commissioners. I'm Callie Kim. Ms. Richardson introduced me a while ago, but I haven't had the opportunity to address you yet. So I'm happy to do that today, and I look forward to working with you more in the future. I don't have the state law off the tip of my tongue right now, but I do know that the state law means that we cannot regulate solar panels in some circumstances, but the county can regulate vegetation cover and things like screening.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning, commissioners. This is Travis Seawards, Chair Farini. I just wanted to add one thing. It is regulated in the extent that the solar project like this would need to get a building permit. I think the clarification we would just want to make is they're not required to get planning permits, but they do need to get a building permit.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Seward. I think that yeah, that's in agreement with Ms. Vosberg. So Commissioner Blau.
No, that's my question. I mean, yeah, you gotta have a building permit to build anything, and that's different than getting a plumbing permit. But if I want to put solar in my front yard, as long as the structure I put it on is safe, I have the right to do that. You have no right as a county to regulate how I do that. Not that I like that, by the way. I would love to have some control over it, but the state has said, no, I get to do however I want to build my solar, that I want to do it.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make one clarification on that.
Yes, please.
So for a solar system, although it does not require a planning permit, if you did want to put it in your front yard setback, you would need to get a variance or you'd have to go through planning to determine that, whether or not that could be located there.
I think that's a good idea. Let's have some controls in place. Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to get clarification on this issue of the hydrogeologist report. As you know, we considered a proposed introduction of the report, a report by Mr. Rick Hoffman, dated the 12th, actually, yesterday, and for good reason decided that should not be part of our consideration today. So what I'm concerned about is that Ms. Vosberg was relying on a report by a hydrogeologist, and I just want to be sure that it's the same hydrogeologist and that the appellants had access to that report before today's hearing.
Ms. Vosberg.
Yes, Commissioner Cooney through the chair. So the report that I had referred to in my presentation was a well completion report for the well, which was drilled relatively recently in 2017, and it was prepared by the same hydrogeologist. That well completion report is prepared after, obviously, completion of the drilling of the well. What I believe was the material that was not accepted into the record was the same hydrogeologist, Rick Hoffman, prepared a memo that essentially said more or less the same thing that we've concluded from our review of the original 2017 well completion report. We do have that document in our case file, but I do not believe that it was included in the staff report as an attachment. So we would have to provide it separately to review to the appellant.
And for present purposes, my concern is the appellant's access to that document. Is that something that was submitted just to staff, or was it also submitted to the appellant, if you know?
Yes, Commissioner Cooney through the chair. It was submitted just to staff recently. This question came about kind of in response to the supplemental document that we received on Monday, just before the deadline. So that's why we had kind of reached out to the applicant to ask for additional information and verify that we had made the correct conclusion. But that document, the well completion report, has not been provided to the appellant to date.
But you're relying on that well completion document in part for your response to the issue about adequate water supply for the project.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Park, you did have your hand up earlier.
Oh, yes. Ms. Vosberg, I have a comment to make about the screening for the outdoor landscaping on the outdoor grow, and that would be along the south edge. And then I'll have a follow-up question about modification of the landscaping plan to accommodate a suggestion I'm going to make. But I think this is best done after the appellant and the applicant have had a chance to address what they're going to address. And then my question can be, in a sense, for all three of you. But I'd like to ask you to do me a favor. When I looked at the presentations this morning online for the applicant and your own very good presentation. I didn't see a slide directly addressing that outdoor landscaping at the outdoor grow. But I do find that there's a page in the site plans that are included as an exhibit to the staff report. And I wonder if between now and the time when the applicant and appellant finish their presentations, you could prepare a slide or figure out some way to get on the screen for all of us to look at the same time that that shows that particular landscaping feature at the south edge of the outdoor grow. Can you do that?
Commissioner Park, through the chair. Yeah, certainly. We can put together a quick slide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to the appellant presentation. Who will be presenting on behalf of the appellant?
Good morning.
Good morning. So the way I'd like this to proceed is a total of 15 minutes time will be allocated to you. I would recommend 10 minutes for your presentation, and then you save 5 minutes for rebuttal, but it is your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Good morning. My name is Elise Kosar-Daly, and the appellants, William and Catherine Hames, have retained me to represent them with respect to the appeal on this project. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you this morning. And I do apologize for the submittal on Monday. I was pulled into this case on last Wednesday, so I didn't quite have sufficient time to get that to you sooner. So I appreciate your patience with respect to that and your willingness to read the additional documentation. I would like to keep about 10 minutes for this presentation and then save about 5 for rebuttal. So I appreciate that suggestion as well. Before I get started, I do want to ask that the Commission consider continuing this hearing for 2 reasons. One, because of this hydrogeologist's well report, which the appellant and I have not had the opportunity to review. I haven't had a chance to send it by our hydrogeological expert to take a look at as well. And because planning staff has relied upon it to make their conclusions with respect to the adequacy of water on site, I would request that you continue the hearing so that we can take a look at it and that the commissioners can take a look at it as well. The other reason I'd like to request that you continue the hearing is given this new information with respect to the CEQA analysis. The additional information with respect to the emission of VOCs from cannabis plants themselves was not actually analyzed in the PEIR. While the PEIR looked at volatile organic compound emissions from mobile sources and other items that are ancillary to cannabis grows and processing, they didn't actually look at the VOCs that were emitted by the plants themselves, except for in the context of odor. Given the change from non-attainment transitional to then attainment after the PEIR was certified, and then back to non-attainment with respect to ozone, I think it's particularly important that the Commission honor their obligations under the California Environmental Quality Act and do the necessary environmental review that's required by CEQA. CEQA guidelines are very clear with respect to a PEIR. If there's substantial changes that occur with respect to the circumstances under which the project is undertaken, in this case, this would be the information with regard to the additional VOCs that are created by cannabis plants. And also, if there's new information which was not known and could not have been known at the time the EIR was certified as complete, then the county is required by law to do additional environmental analysis. So for those reasons, I would like to request that the Commission continue the hearing so that they can do their due diligence with respect to these items.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kozar. Does that conclude your presentation?
No, I wanted to give you the opportunity to consider that request. Okay, well, why don't you continue on with your presentation? Okay, thank you. Before I talk through the legal issues that were raised, particularly in the Monday submittal, I'd like to have Appellant William Haynes, who lives on the property that is surrounded on three sides by the proposed project, just share a little bit about himself and his experience with the project. Bill, would you like to go ahead?
Yes. Am I on now?
You're on.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bill Haynes Jr., or Billy. I have been a general engineering contractor specializing in land improvement and development for over 45 years in this county. My grandfather worked for Hollister Estate Company for 55 years. My father was a grading contractor for over 40 years, developing avocado and lemon ranches as his specialty. I have worked on estates in Montecito, avocado and lemon ranches in the Santa Barbara and Goleta foothills, developed vineyards and private ranches in the San Ynez Valley, and do so to this day. I love the rural way of life and have always tried to provide that to my family as it was provided to me. Our Mail Road home is to be our forever home. After 18 and a half years of enjoying it with our adult children and grandchildren, we now face the potential of cannabis odor and development on three sides of it. If this project is put in, we will be surrounded by the smell of cannabis. We've already spent $30,000 on a security gate and have installed security lights and fencing because we are now concerned about the safety of our family. This project will impact our ability to enjoy our home with our family. As an experienced, licensed grading and excavating contractor, I have seen the plans for 705 Mail Road, and there are a number of deficiencies. One of those is the detention basin. There is no detail as to what it detains or where it discharges to. Another would be the 15,800 square foot of solar panels with no landscape screening from our property or our neighbors' properties. These would be important areas I would address upon presentation if this was one of my projects. The County of Santa Barbara also has not done enough to address the concerns of longtime residents such as ourselves. We are particularly concerned about odor from cannabis grows in agricultural lands. My wife and I have expressed our concerns to the planners of this project in lengthy emails dating back to last year to no avail. We had no choice but to appeal the project based on the impact it will have on our home and our ability to enjoy it and the potential loss of property values because of the above project. For these reasons and of the issues our attorney pointed out in her letter and will share with you now, my wife and I would like the planners to postpone or deny the approval of this project. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Blau, did you have a question before I continued? And Commissioner Park?
Well, I have a question for the chair. Seeing as how the appellant has asked for a continuance, if for some reason there was one to be granted, well, I think we should do it now and not waste our time with the rest of this hearing. I'm not willing to make a motion for the continuance. I just wanted to make sure that my fellow commissioners felt the same way. If for some reason there was a desire to do a continuance, let's take up that issue now so we don't waste our time this afternoon hearing something that's going to come back to us at some future date.
Okay, well, the reason I decided to go on, Commissioner Blau, was because none of the other commissioners raised their hands. So
Yeah,
I did not.
I just wanted to make sure that, yeah, we don't have to, yeah. I mean, I'm just
To me, To me, the time to have done that was when that came up. I didn't see anybody had an appetite for it. But if you guys want to go ahead and take the time now to go through that, let's hear all of your views now that you're interested. Commissioner Park?
That's not why I raised my hand, but Commissioner Blau beat me to it and raised an issue, and I'll answer your question there. I personally don't want to address whether we should continue it now or not. I'd like to hear the rest of what Ms. Cosart-Daly has to say and what the applicant has to say, because the issues that Ms. Cosart-Daly raises is the reason for the continuance, the hydrogeologist report. I'm not sure that makes much difference to my analysis of this. And I just would need to hear more about it. So I couldn't vote one way or the other on the continuance. And as far as the reference to new information on the VOCs, I'm not even sure what the reference is to. Maybe it's the Visuete report that was presented 2 years ago.
But Commissioner Park, excuse me, but don't you think the time for the questions is when the appellant finishes their presentation, then that would be timely?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, I'd like to keep this meeting moving forward. Okay, so Commissioner Bradley?
I just want to
All I'm on right now is Commissioner Blau opened this up. I think it's out of order, but I'm entertaining my fellow commissioners for a brief moment here.
Okay, so brief moment is I think we should continue with the hearing with Mr. Cosart-Daly and also the applicant. That's what we've done on all our other cases. I feel strongly about that.
With the chair. Okay, let's move on to the applicant or the appellant's presentation. For point of order here, Mr. Villalobos, how much time does the appellant have left on their 10-minute clock?
Mr. Chair, so just a little over 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Cosart-Daly, please proceed.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. So with respect to the CEQA analysis, as you've heard, there's been additional detail that's come out specifically with respect to the VOCs that are emitted by the cannabis plants themselves. And we are no in in attainment for ozone. Ozone's created when VOCs and nitrous oxide mix in the presence of sunlight. And that creates an issue. If you look at Exhibit E and Exhibit F of the submittal that I provided on Monday, the studies themselves are there for you to take a look at. Attainment, the attainment for ozone was changed by CARB in February of 2021. That does have an impact on how the county should analyze ozone pollution and air pollution that contributes to ozone. So that does warrant further investigation. The PEIR doesn't identify, discuss, or assess whether biogenic VOCs from cannabis cultivation impact ozone, contribute to the county's failure to reach attainment with respect to ozone, or discuss the impact of VOCs on human health or on wildlife. It really does warrant additional study under CEQA from the county. Likewise, the CEQA checklist that's relied upon by the county for this project doesn't list any of this with respect to its analysis. It's missing entirely from the CEQA analysis here. And while the applicant may argue that it's a small operation, under CEQA, you're required to look at cumulative impacts. And as you can see from the county's website, you've almost reached your cannabis cap for unincorporated Santa Barbara County. So that's going to be a huge cumulative impact with other projects. The next issue is that the project doesn't comply with the development code, and it's specific to the screening of the solar array. As County Council pointed out, while the code says that you do not have to provide a permit except in specific circumstances for the solar panel array, it doesn't say that with respect to landscaping around the array itself. You wouldn't be regulating the solar panel array, but you would be regulating screening. And in fact, the development code requires that you regulate screening as part of a landscape and screening plan. Now, what the code itself says is that you have to reasonably screen any new structure that's associated with cannabis development. If you look at the application, the solar panel array is included as a new structure, therefore it falls under the code. If you look at Exhibit I of the submittal that I provided on Monday, and if you need to later, I can pull up photos for you. My clients actually took photos from 246 and from Mail Road, both of which are public areas, public access ways. You can absolutely see the site and location for the solar panels. And if you have solar panels that are going to be 15,800 square feet, that's about the size of a third of a football field, they're bright and they're reflective, you're going to see them. The next point is that the evidence doesn't establish that there's sufficient water on site. You can look at the well usage report, and what it does is it relies on averages with respect to the CEQA thresholds guide and with respect to a document out of San Luis Obispo County. Now, these averages are in no way reflective of what the actual water usage is on site. And even if they were reflective of the water usage on site, they don't actually establish how much water is available in that well and in that area. There's no analysis of what's available there. There's only an analysis of future usage. Even if that was valid, which I contend that it's not, if you look at historical information about the project site, there was only 6.6 acres of vineyards over the last 10 years. And in fact, that would contribute to a substantial water usage increase over time, which will impact not only the project itself, but other wells in the area and the Santa Rosa watershed. The last point I'd like to make with respect to this is that the project application just isn't specifically sufficient for planning commission approval. The odor mitigation measures don't talk about the exact type of carbon filtration that will be used, how much air will be pushed through, how the air is going to be pushed through the carbon filtration to actually mitigate odor. So that's a great promise that the applicant is making, but there's just not sufficient data to hold them to that promise. The other issue is that the site plan doesn't clearly indicate that the cannabis outdoor grow is going to be 50 feet away from the property line. While staff finds that that's in the record, it's not. So you'd want to make sure that they're sufficiently specific with respect to that. And there are also some issues with the detention basin as well. Thank you for listening to me tear through those 3 minutes. So in conclusion, I want to renew that request to continue the hearing with respect to the CEQA analysis and now with respect to the well report. I'm also going to ask that you require that the applicant screen the solar panel array with trees and other landscaping in order to screen that view from 246 and Mail Road. Further study and analyze the water that's available for the project, and ensure that the applicant provides sufficiently specific detail that is enforceable by the Planning Commission. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stand by for questions. Commissioner Park.
Yeah, I have a question about something that neither you or Mr. Hames raised in your presentation.
Yes.
And I don't have the benefit of having any request for a site visit from you folks or any communication prior to the hearing, so I don't really know what's on your minds other than what you've just said. And you probably heard me refer earlier to screening for the outdoor grow. I'm not talking about the solar, but the outdoor grow. And that screening is in the plans as I read them, and maybe Ms. Vosberg will correct me, is approximately 350 feet of coastal redwoods, 15 feet on center, 24 of them. And I just wonder if you folks have a comment about the suitability of that screening. I will, and I'll address it, but it's a little awkward if I'm addressing something that I think that you might care about or future owners might care about when we haven't heard from you on that subject. But maybe you folks think that's just fine and have no comment. I don't know.
Well, I appreciate the question, and I'm going to defer to my client on this one because I don't live at the site. Mr. Hames?
Okay. I'm sorry, the question has to do with the the landscape plan for the outdoor grow, correct?
That's right.
I don't see I think that's adequate. The redwoods with the spacing.
But Mr. Commissioner Park, I'm curious to hear.
Well, I'll comment on it after we have the presentation from the appellant as well.
Okay.
By
further
the applicant, I'm
questions
sorry.
of the commission, then we can move on to the applicant's presentation. Ms. McComb.
Good morning, Chair Farini and members of the commission. It's my presentation, the PowerPoint up on the screen.
And Ms. McCone, just to verify, right, 10 minutes and 5 minutes for rebuttal is the recommendation here?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, understood. Thank you. My name is Gallery Macon. I'm the land use planner on this project, and I'm here today with the property owner, applicant, Billy Hines. It's funny, their names are very similar. Billy Hames and Billy Hines. And the project hydrogeologist, Rick Hoffman. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the water, so we asked him to come and speak to that. Next slide. I just wanted to frame the project and start by saying that the applicant is a rarity. It's one of the only groups in the county that are involved in both wine and cannabis. And they've specifically and painstakingly designed a project with sensitivity towards all the adjacent agriculture, the neighbors, and the well-being and balance of growing cannabis in the county. You may recall this applicant had actually filed an appeal of another cannabis project just across Highway 246 because of the size and proximity of their to their proposed winery. To separate this case even more, this is a mainly indoor grow operation, which is a much more rigorous and expensive process. And it just shows their commitment to a long-term business plan in this area. In addition to designing this boutique cannabis project, we've made a concerted effort to work with the neighbors. Back in the summer of last year, we sent a letter to everyone on the county's noticing list for this project to explain the scope, offer to meet, listen to any concerns, see if we can address any of it into the project during that planning process. We wanted full transparency and we were hoping to settle everything, prior to the project approval. We made multiple attempts. No one was actually willing to meet with us. And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to meet with the appellant until just recently. They reached out about a week or so ago. And that was the first time we'd actually heard any of the concerns. And, we feel we've gone about this with the best of intentions regarding our neighbors and are fully willing and will continue to do so. Next slide. A few general comments before getting into the specifics. This property was designed initially as a vineyard, and there's nearly 30 acres of grapes planted here, a lot of natural vegetation, and the beautification of this property is something the applicant has always put front and center. The applicant has chosen to only grow 3.5 acres of outdoor with no hoops, and they're volunteering to start with just 1 acre the first year, just to make sure that odor is not an issue. Odor is of utmost concern for them. The cultivation area was designated by taking into account the topography, the wind direction, and the distance between the nearby residences. With regards to the solar panels, the applicant is required by the county to offset 100% of the electricity usage. We've placed the solar array slightly inclined on a hill as close to the building as possible, facing away from the appellant. As previously mentioned, the aesthetic character of the property is important. Placing the solar panels has been a challenge, but it is a requirement and there's just limited land to do so. Furthermore, it was designed using a very conservative energy estimate, so may very likely become smaller than the existing current footprint. We just wanted to make sure we don't come in with anything larger during the building permit process. Next slide. So I'm just going to briefly touch on the specific project components. This is the outdoor cultivation area. Again, it's 3.5 acres. It's replacing vineyard in that location. It's screened from public view. The composting area and parking is all within the fenced area. And you can see right there the 50-foot setback from the adjacent property line is shown on the plans. And there's an avoidance of the environmentally sensitive areas. Next slide. These are the facilities. Ms. Vosberg did an excellent job going through these. I'll just touch on them quickly so that we can hear from the hydrogeologist. Next slide. This is the one proposed greenhouse. It's 2,800 square feet. I showed a rendering over there with the proposed landscaping of what it would look like from the street view. And there's a carbon filtration system within this greenhouse, and it's non-venting, so it is an enclosed greenhouse. Next slide. This is the existing 1,800 square foot greenhouse. And so the other one is going to be slightly larger, but it's going to look like this. And you can see where it is on the floor plan, on the site plan, and the rendering. Next slide. This is the newly constructed state-of-the-art indoor growing facility. And they're really proud of this. It's very technologically advanced. It's fully sealed. They have these rooms inside the building that are sealed again. And they're very proud of this structure. And it's, if you want a tour, it's really nice. And it's 4,800 square feet of growing inside. And next slide. So this is one of the residences that's being converted. This one is going to be used as part of the some drying, but more like packaging, and the sort of break room also for the employees. And based on the air exchanges, and we do have those calculations on the plans of how many filtration, what type of carbon filtration and what the calculations are for how many are required. We're putting in an extra one into this building. Next slide. This is the other residence that's being converted. This one's just going to be for drying, 1,700 square feet. And based on the calculations, only one filter was required. We're putting in 4 into this one. And you can see the rendering next to it as well. Next slide. And this is that small shed that would be used for building, for drying. It's about 800 square feet. Next slide. So this slide shows where the neighboring, where the Hames family residence is. And I do want to point out that they're not actually adjacent to this property. There is another property in between this property and theirs. And that neighbor has no concerns with this project. So there's some distances. The outdoor cultivation is about 700 feet away as the crow flies, and they can't actually see it from their property. And then the solar panels, you can see outlined in red, is about 730 feet away. And you can see how it has kind of that slight slope. And then on this slide, I can have Rick chime in on the water issue. And I just wanted to be clear, when we're going through the land use process, permitting process, we did have to confirm all of the water data. We had memos. We provided all of the information required to get the planning permit approval. The new information, or the information regarding the water well completion report, it was only in response to this supplemental item that came up on Monday. So it really was not a requirement of the project going through the process. So Rick, if you're there, you can speak to the water issue.
Commissioners, my name is Rick Hoffman. I'm a hydrogeologist. I've been in Santa Barbara County for 50 years now. I went through UCSB back in the 70s. I've been involved with several hundred water wells over my career, many of which are along the 246 corridor. I'm coming in a little late on this, but the water well completion report that I put out for the owner back in 2017 is a very thorough report that describes the ability of the well to produce the water that was needed for a project that was at that time not defined, but probably a vineyard. The well is 700 feet deep. It's very productive. We pumped that well up to rates as high as 1,100 gallons per minute. It's one of the bigger wells in the area. But like most wells, we don't run them that high. This well has a permanent pump that's capable of 350 to 400 gallons a minute. The water demand for the existing project, including the vineyard and the new cannabis facility, equates to about 24 gallons per minute. When I describe wells, I commonly use a car analogy. If this well was capable of driving 110 miles per hour, they are currently driving it at 35 or 40 miles an hour, and the water demand is equivalent to a 2 mile per hour driving rate. It's a very low demand on a very large, highly productive well. The local aquifer is a sand. This whole part of the valley back 500,000 years ago was a beach horizon. It looks just like beach sand. It's very permeable. There's very little runoff. So when it rains, the recharge to this part of the Buellton Uplands Basin is quite large. It's a significant aquifer in this particular area. I have no difficulty with, from a water perspective, supporting the ability of this well to produce the needed water for this project. Other than that, I have no other comments, but I'm very able to answer any question you may have about the adequacy of this well. And the report that you haven't seen is basically a summary, a condensation of the well that I wrote 5-6 years ago. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you, Rick.
Mr. Hoffman, if you could be available for after the presentation for questions, would be helpful.
Certainly can. Thanks. Anytime. Any questions?
Thank you, Rick. Next slide. Just wanted to end again on the project. It's a very small grow site, single grow cycle, 3.5 acres. They're going to start with 1 acre on year 1. And all the buildings are fully sealed, non-venting. They have a state-of-the-art indoor grow facility. They see the solar array as actually a big plus for their project for green energy. I know some other projects just buy credits, but they're doing it correctly. And we've made a real effort to work with our neighbors, and we want to be good neighbor. They're going to be here for a very long time. And the cannabis part of their project is only 3.9% of the total acreage of the property, and they're going to continue to grow grapes. Next slide. I think that's it. Thank you. I'm here for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Macon. Questions of the commission, Commissioner Black.
Yeah, question for staff. I'm a little confused here. So I'm a farmer and I own 30 acres, and right now I have 20 acres planted, and I decide I want to plant 10 more acres of whatever crop I want to grow, I now have to get permission from the county to plant additional acreage for my farm?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, no, this is, if you were planting cannabis, you would have to come in and get an additional permit for cannabis. But for any other crop, no, you would not need to come into the county for permission.
Okay, so I really don't understand the issue, the hydrology issues here, to tell you the truth. I mean, there are crops other than cannabis that require a lot more water than cannabis does. So why am I having to justify the water for cannabis when I could grow some other crop that maybe uses twice as much water as the cannabis does? I don't get it. What are we doing here? And actually, I probably should put that question to the chair, since he's my expert as far as I'm concerned when it comes to farming.
Well, we'll draw that out in a little bit, Commissioner Blau. Okay, Commissioner Cooney.
Mr. Chair, I had a question for Mr. Hoffman, if he's still there.
Yeah, we asked him to.
Yeah, I'm here.
He's here. He's ready.
Good morning, Mr. Hoffman.
Morning.
I should disclose that I know Mr. Hoffman for not all of his time in Santa Barbara, but for a lot of it. And I was eager to read his report. I was sorry it was not submitted until this morning, but I can ask the question of him. Our concern here is whether the appellant's position that the cannabis grow is going to deplete the groundwater basin to an unreasonable extent is well-founded. It's not whether the well itself is productive, it seems to be, but the effect of drawing out what it will do on the aquifer. If you could narrow your response to that, Rick, I'd appreciate it.
Valid question, good question. I get those sort of questions quite regularly these days as we see some of our groundwater basins show signs of stress due to both increased production over the decades and the current drought we're in. I've been doing wells here for 45 years. I've looked at a lot of well data for a long time. The way we look at well data is to look at what are called hydrographs. These are long-term review of water level changes through time. You look at monitoring wells, if you're lucky enough to have good monitoring wells, that one, are a deep enough well, two, do we have a lot of data over many, many years or hopefully decades, and is it regularly collected? So you build these graphs. I reviewed some of the data currently being collected as part of the Groundwater Sustainability Act is being conducted in the San Ynez Valley. There's three major areas: the western part, the central, and the eastern part of the San Ynez Valley. This is in the central part. This well is in what's called the Buellton Uplands Basin. It's a fairly substantial basin. It's probably the best of the three in terms of how it's responding to these droughts and increased water uses. There's several good hydrographs in this general area. When I say the general area, I say within a couple of miles of this site. Prior to looking at these, it had been my experience in working the Drum Canyon area and the Mail Road area between Buellton and Santa Rita Valley area, that the water levels have been relatively stable over the years. And that was supporting the comment I had a minute ago about this aquifer is a sand, it's the beach, highly permeable, high porosity, meaning a lot of water in place in volume between the sand grains. And it does go down during drought and it does rise during rainy seasons. It's fairly subtle in terms of the changes because the demand is relatively low in this area compared to the recharge capability. What the hydrographs that I've looked at are showing a spread between real wet cycles and real dry cycles of somewhere between 10, and the worst one I saw was a 30-foot variation in water level between the best of conditions and the worst of conditions through 80 years of time. Some of those hydrographs go back to the 1930s. Assuming the worst case scenario, assuming a 30-foot spread between good and bad, we have to realize that this well, this straw into the kettle, the aquifer, is nearly 700 feet deep. A 30-foot change is relatively minor under current conditions. The well interference potential between this well and other wells is relatively insignificant because the cone of depression, the well interference issues related to nearby wells is relatively minor because the aquifer is so permeable. It's very permeable. So your drawdown impacts are very minor. An increase in water use of 24 gallons per minute, that's if you divide the water demand over a whole year's worth of time, it works out to 24 gallons per minute on a sustained basis. That's not the way you run things. You run things by turning on the well at 300 or 400 gallons a minute. You run it for an hour and you've met all your water demand for the whole day. The drawdown is very minor. I mean, it's measured in feet, not even tens of feet. It's pretty small when you look at a 24 gallon a minute increase. So your question's valid. How is this well going to impact the basin? It's going to be relatively minor. I mean, between using a vineyard, and some of your commissioners ask these questions, what's the using a vineyard and a pot farm? Not a lot. It's all agriculture. One is a much higher value crop than another crop. So you see, that's why we're having so many of these cannabis farms come in. I don't see a major impact on other wells in the area from a modest increase in water use is my short answer. And I too, for sake of disclosure, I know Billy Hames. I didn't know that Billy was the appellate on this thing, but Billy and I go way back to these old Goleta avocado farms back in the 70s and 80s. So I didn't realize he was the neighbor out here. So my thoughts are with Billy. I get it. But this well is not going to be part of the problem. That's what I'm leading up to. I can support this well pretty easily. Thanks.
Thanks. You went further than I imagined, far beyond your written report, I'm sure, and it's been very helpful. Thank you.
Pleasure. Commissioner Cooney's done. Okay. Mr. Hoffman, while you're up there, this well could support more vineyard if it were, put in further use there. He's got, I think, around 20 acres now. About how many acres do you estimate he could add and use the well's potential, given all of your calculations?
My recollection, this is a 90-acre piece of land.
Yes, sir.
He could plant the whole thing and it wouldn't be a problem. I work for a lot of vineyards and water companies and small water districts and mutual water companies and ranchette homeowners groups. And I commonly see vineyards, small vineyards, family vineyards, tens of acre sized vineyards get along okay on 20 and 30 gallon minute wells. It means the lower the yield well, the more storage you may need. You can make up for a low yielding well by putting water into a reservoir or into tanks to allow for peak water demand during times of heat, as an example. This well could be pumped directly into a vineyard with this kind of capacity. He could probably irrigate an entire 90-acre parcel with 90 acres of vines here very easily from just direct pumping right from the well, no storage. So I have little problem. This is a pretty darn big well. It's quite large. There are other wells up and down the Drum Canyon corridor and the 246 corridor that are quite big. They're multi-100 gallon per minute wells out along this corridor.
Okay, thank you. And then in the staff report, I believe I read that the well is about 5 years old. Am I incorrect there?
That's the right 2017.
So in through your experience with this well and reviewing all of the data, its use over the last 5 years has not had a significant impact on the aquifer from which it's pumping?
Good question. I'm not sure. My re-involvement with this well was just last week. I built the well almost 5 years ago, test the well, certify the well, write a detailed owner's report for the well. That's what my water well completion is. It's a very detailed record of the well. It gives them recommendations on pump sizing, how to use the well. I don't know how they've been recording, and I don't know the exact water use through time. The applicant's civil engineer, Flowers and Associates, presented me with some data in terms of what they estimate the water use is for a vineyard of this size. And there are what are called water duty factors, how many acre feet of water or gallons per acre of water you need to sustain a vineyard operation in this area. And the numbers that are presented in the staff report that were presented to you folks are pretty accurate. Roughly 1 to 1.5 acre feet of water per year per acre of vineyard is pretty typical. You can get by on less, and it's the way you manage the vineyard or other crops. Row crops are much more water intensive. Row crops in Santa Maria Valley are commonly 4 to 5 acre feet of water per acre of crop. Vines are relatively low water use, low water demand for crops, and that's why you're seeing them around here. It's the right climate, it's the right soil, low water use, high value crop. It's why vineyards have taken off in the last 40 years.
Okay, there may be other questions of other commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bradley.
Thank you. Thank you. I had a couple questions, actually for Ms. Macon, and that is, there's an indoor building, I think you called it Building 11 on the exhibit, and it's there now, but what is it used for now? I mean, I guess a question that never came up or was never explained, is there any cannabis being grown on the property now?
It's been sitting vacant for years, waiting for this land use
Waiting
permit.
for the land use permit, okay.
It took way, they submitted back in April of 2019. And so it's been 2.5 years to get to this point.
So you got the land use permit issued and then the building was built or something along
They built this building as just an ag structure.
Oh, I see.
A few years ago, and it's just been sitting vacant until they went through this process to get the cannabis.
Okay, great. That helps clarify it. The other thing is, you made a comment about how there's another parcel between the applicant's project and the appellant's project. And when I'm looking at the project site slide in your presentation, I guess I'm confused. Does anybody with a cursor, can anybody explain that to me? You know what I mean? Because it looks like you actually had a later slide with a perspective or a panoramic photo that showed where the appellant's property is and then other parts on your applicant's property. But I guess I'm looking for something in plan that shows where is the appellant's house.
If someone can bring up any
slide
one of those
3 maybe
maps, the project site map or
slide 3 on her PowerPoint.
Slide 3. And they do share one section, but if you look at the APN 099210017, that's the actual adjacent owner, and so this is kind of like a horseshoe shape, and inside the Hames is the one that has like a skinny driveway coming up, and then yes, that's the appellant's property.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you. That's really important for me to understand because I wasn't able to do a site visit yesterday. So okay, that was my second question, and then so that is the one parcel that doesn't have an APN on your lovely site map, because I was looking at their appeal form and it had a number 055, and that would be the L shape of the appellant's property, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That really helps. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Park.
Yes, I'm going to focus on just 2 things, briefly on housing and then on the outdoor, then the landscaping for the outdoor cultivation. And Ms. Macon, you've had other projects in front of us, cannabis projects, and you know that I bring this up every time. And so I'm not picking on you and I'm not picking on this project. When I first drove to this site months ago, I got lost a little bit about which driveway I was coming in, and I came into the drive to the one of the residential units. And one thing I've thought about was it's kind of cool that there's some residential units there on the site, because then some of the workers that will be working there, I think it's 7 employees, would be able to live on site and not have to use the highways, not have to commute, not to have to add to that traffic load, and they'd probably be happier themselves. But now I see that the project's basically turning all the residential housing into processing facilities, and you'll have no residences on site. And I wonder about that, because so many of the easiest ways to add residential housing, things like ADUs or park mod trailers, they're kind of dependent on having some existing housing on site. So do you have any strategy for having flexibility to have on-site housing for your employees?
Commissioner Parks, the applicant did have a residential trailer on the property that I think the permit had expired, and so we've called for the removal. But there is an area, and I believe that's the area where you had tried to come in. There is an area that would be suitable for a residence. And I do believe the applicant at some future date would propose a residence there with a trailer.
Well, I brought this up many times in other projects, and it never really gets anywhere. I hope someday I see a staff report that addresses that concern. And I'm certainly not going to hold up your project about this, but I really do urge you to consider building that flexibility into the project and taking a look at the ag employee dwelling unit ordinance as well, because I think that'll be something good for the project at some point. So let me move on to my other concern, and it's for the outdoor cultivation landscaping, which is sort of at the southeast edge of the outdoor grow, and it kind of runs in a southwest and northeast direction. And Ms. Bosberg, that's where I asked you if you could prepare a slide that would show that. Do you have that you could show us?
Commissioner Park, through the chair, I did prepare a couple slides. I'm not sure if we can bring them up, but if not, I think Ms. McCone's PowerPoint slides also had some excellent slides that show the landscaping in those areas.
Well, let's go back then. They don't show the detail that was shown on the site plan, but I can describe it. Let's go back to Ms. McCone's PowerPoint and to the slide that showed the site plan.
The fourth slide is probably the best one.
There you go. And you can see a green line. I hope people can see a green line. And that green line is just below the representation of the grow area. Okay. And when I look on the site plan, I see what's proposed. Now, what I always ask for is that we use as much native vegetation as possible, because it's more drought resistant. It looks more appropriate aesthetically in the neighborhood for both the public and nearby property owners. And it's more likely to survive without active intervention over the years. And I hate to see landscaping installed and see it die within a couple of years because people can't take care of it. So when I look at the landscaping plan for this site, it calls for that green line, which is approximately 345 feet, to be all California coastal redwoods. And coastal redwoods are tall. They grow fast. They're not particularly bushy. They're going to be 24 of them, 15 feet on center. So it won't be much of a screen in between of them. Yet it'll be a tall feature relatively soon that'll be seen throughout the area. If you go to the slide that says neighboring residents, could you go to that one? It might be the next one.
That's towards the back.
There you go. And you can see the prevalent vegetation in the area. It's all coast live oak, kind of a coast live oak savanna over grassland and some woodland. And then there's some, I can't tell from here, but I presume it's coyote brush and black sage and artemisia that's in the brush here and there. And that's what things should kind of look like. To plant a big line of redwoods is, I think, a mistake. It's not going to screen very well. It's going to look completely out of place. And it's going to be really hard to keep it up over the years because redwoods don't grow there. They like to grow on the coast. They'll like the fog that you get in there, but it'll be hard. They're going to have to be supplemented with a heck of a lot of water. And that'll last a very long time. So I think you're much better off with some mixture of landscaping, things like toyon and hollyleaf cherry and the live oak and sugar bush and coffee berry. They're all over the place. They're very easily grown. And furthermore, instead of planting them in one big line, since you have a 50-foot buffer, you can kind of make it look more like a copse, a grove, so to speak, in that 50 feet, extend the landscaping out in sort of a third dimension. And you'd have something that the neighbors will appreciate, even if they don't care right now, but they'll appreciate it. And it'll be better for the public and easier for you to take care of. So my question for you, Ms. Macon, is are you folks willing to make that change? And my question for staff is, can they make that change without us having to hold up approval of this project?
My answer depends on staff's answer.
Yeah, well, it's logical.
Ms. Vosberg.
Yeah, perhaps Mr. Dargill can respond.
By the way, I've asked that question twice before. One was on the DeFriel project that was the satellite project out on Santa Rosa Road. And one was on the Mose project in the Coahoma Valley. And the answer from P&D then was yes, you can make those changes without holding the thing up, but maybe you've got a different one today.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, if the applicant is willing to make that change, the commission can direct the applicant and direct staff to make that change on the plans, and we can proceed forward.
Ms. Macon.
Commissioner Park, through the chair, I'm sure the applicant is happy to make that change. I think it's a nice change. I'm not sure if they've purchased the trees yet, but I just got confirmation. Yes, they are willing to make the change. So as long as it doesn't hold up the project approval today, they're happy to do that.
Very good. Thank you. And I have no further questions or comments at this time.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Park. Okay, does staff have anything they would like to add at this point?
Yes, Chair Freeney, thank you. I think that we just wanted to quickly reiterate a couple things that were mentioned. So with regard to the comments made on new information pertaining to air quality, I think we just wanted to reiterate, staff has reviewed the supplemental package provided by the appellant and did find that the information included does not change the project findings or change staff's recommendation on this project. We did not find that the information provided constitutes new information of substantial importance, which was not known or could not have been known at the time the PEIR was prepared. Like we had mentioned, the PEIR did address cannabis biogenic VOCs. They were known and discussed in the PEIR, and the fact that VOCs and NOx are precursors to ozone was also known and discussed in the PEIR. With regard to the solar panels, just wanted to reiterate that we believe the solar panels serve the entire property. They are included on the site plan because it is a complete representation of the project site. Similarly, the vineyard area is also included on the site plan, but again, the solar panels are in the Land Use and Development Code. Exempt from planning permit approval. So our interpretation was that there are no requirements within the Land Use and Development Code that require screening of solar panels. And that is all I have on my list. I don't know if Mr. Dargle wants to add anything.
I think that's all we have for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Macon, are you still listening?
Chair Freeney, yes, I am here.
Okay. Previous projects that have come before us in this vicinity are members of the San Ynez River Water Conservation District. And I had a question of either you or perhaps the property owner, whoever is most knowledgeable with that, or if you all have any knowledge of being involved with that. Can you find out who that would be? And I'll be coming back to you at some point.
Sure.
Meanwhile, we're going
I personally do not know, so I will.
Okay, so you can
will
check
ask.
that out for me. And then we are now going to move on to public comment. Mr. Villalobos, do we have any public comment?
Mr. Chair, we do have one speaker. Teddy Kabugos.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Kabugos.
Thank you, Chair Farini and the commissioners for allowing me to speak today. I just wanted to call in support of this project. I've known the owners of the property as well as the operators for a very long time. I actually grew up with the operator in Santa Barbara and have known the owners for over 12 years now. And I just want to say I've also toured the property. It's an extremely compatible project. It's very, very small in size. Like Gellere said, the model here works, and logistics work very well as well, having processing and drying on site. Again, to concede to 1 acre the first year because they do. And I had long talks with also Gellere and Billy about this. It just shows their concern for the odor to ensure that it won't be a problem for the neighborhood. Again, I think this project, in reference to size, compatibility to the neighborhood, and logistics, is a very, very good project for this industry. And that's all I have to say. So thank you for letting me speak today, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Kabugos.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Kabugos was our only speaker.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Now we go back to the appellant rebuttal. Ms. Cozart-Daly.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. First, I wanted to address staff's comment with regard to CEQA. Now, what is unique about this situation is that you need to look at the VOCs and their impact on ozone in the context of non-attainment, not non-attainment transitional. That's one of the reasons why this is specifically important and required under CEQA. And with respect to Ms. Vosberg's assertion that this is adequately studied in the PEIR, we'll have to agree to disagree. With respect to Commissioner Blau's questions regarding the assessment of water on site and why that's required. When there's a land use permit that's issued, the commission is required to determine that there's sufficient water on site. So that is required by the development code when a land use permit is requested. For my third point, with respect to the groundwater basin issues, I'm sorry, I don't recall exactly which commissioner brought this up, but one commissioner represented that Appellant is making the claim that this project's going to deplete the groundwater basin. I just want to clarify, we didn't make that claim. We simply make the claim that we don't have sufficient data and evidence in the record to make a determination that it won't be depleted. We need that data and evidence, and you need that data and evidence in order to make findings that are supported by evidence of the record. And unfortunately, still at this time, there isn't sufficient evidence. While I appreciate Mr. Hoffman's presentation and commentary, we simply don't have the underlying data in the record that will support that commentary and that assessment. And you really need that in order to make a finding that's supported by the evidence that isn't subject to being overturned by a civil court. In terms of the processing facility, I thought that Commissioner Bradley brought up a very good point with respect to permitting. I would request that the commission require evidence that that facility received the appropriate permitting before approving this project. Then I also wanted to address, and just to set the record straight, Ms. McCon pointed out and asserted that the appellant hadn't engaged with the applicant prior to last week. However, I do, I am new to the case, but I do have records in my files that you should also have in your record, which is communication between appellant's former counsel, Mark Coffin, and with the applicant discussing their concerns about the project that dates back to August of 2020. So this has been an ongoing conversation. I just wanted to disabuse you of any notion that they hadn't interacted with one another to try to come to a resolution before coming to you. I want to reiterate that the screening of the solar panels is within the power and authority of the commission as authorized by the development code, and is required that the commission does provide screening there, though they can't regulate the installation of the solar panels themselves. And I appreciate Commissioner Park's suggestion about screening. So thank you, Commissioner Park. The 1 acre concession, the last point I wanted to make was in response to Mr. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce his name.
Kabugos.
Kabugos, thank you, Commissioner Park. Mr. Kabugos's comment with respect to the 1 acre concession for the first year, while we appreciate that, it would be helpful if it was enforceable. So if there was an agreement or a condition of the permit that there would be 1 acre, there would be an assessment of the odors, and in the event that there are nuisance odors or other issues as determined by a third-party arbiter, that would be ideal with respect to this project. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment.
Commissioner Blau, did you have a question?
Yeah, Ms. Coulter Daly. I have to tell you, I've only been a planning commissioner for 12 or 13 years now. I don't ever remember having, as part of an environmental review, VOCs for an agricultural crop. And maybe you or the staff could help me with that.
Commissioner Blau, you are correct. We, again, as Mr. Dargle said earlier, regular agricultural crops do not come into P&D for permits. In relation to the cannabis program, the PEIR, as Ms. Fosberg stated, did contemplate VOCs in detail and its effects on ozone, and the PEIR was certified by the county. So you are correct.
Okay, so we're not into deliberations yet, but I'm having great difficulty even considering that argument. We don't do it for broccoli. We don't do it for cauliflower. We don't do it for sugar beets. I can't imagine why we do it for cannabis. I'm trying to figure out how there possibly could be a difference between the two. I mean, help me here. I mean, if the PER analyzed it or looked at it, but I don't even know why you would do that. I mean, how does a green plant adversely affect the ozone layers? I don't get it. I mean, they suck up carbon dioxide, they extrude oxygen. That's what the plant's all about. So I'm just curious if you could help me, Ms. Cosart-Daly, why we would do that.
Ms. Cosart-Daly, if you could help us here.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Commissioner Blau, and for outlining your confusion with respect to this. So I can't speak to other agricultural crops. So that's not within my area of expertise. So I'm not going to lead you astray on that point. With respect to any project that's undertaken by the county or by a public agency, and the cannabis ordinance qualifies as a project, it's subject to the California Environmental Quality Act. You have to look at the environmental impacts of something such as the cannabis ordinance. And that's why there was a PEIR done in the first place. Now we can all agree that cannabis isn't going to be naturally occurring all throughout the county in the amount that it is occurring now with this additional commercial cannabis cultivation. And while cannabis is in fact a plant, and plants are natural parts of the environment, commercial cultivation is not, and commercial cultivation of cannabis is not. Now, if you've ever smelled a cannabis grow, which I'm sure you have living in the county, you'll know that there's some significant odors associated with the cannabis. Now, those odors are basically a reflection of the VOCs that we can sense. And if you think about that in terms of VOCs then, so the cannabis is producing a volatile organic compound. It's producing a compound in the air. That compound in the air, when produced in large quantities by commercial cannabis, mixes with nitrous oxide, and that creates ozone. And ozone is a pollutant. And so when you have a commercial crop like cannabis that produces a significant amount, I can't speak to how it compares to, say, broccoli or sugar beets or some other crop, but when it's grown in commercial quantities, such as the quantities that are involved here in the county, it's going to create additional volatile organic compounds, and that's going to have an impact on the environment. It's going to be an adverse impact, and that is particularly relevant here because the county is in non-attainment. We're not living up to the standards that are required by CARB with respect to ozone pollution. And we have an obligation for the health and safety of our county and our residents and on air quality to examine that. And then if we need to, take mitigating measures and steps. And that is what's required under CEQA. Does that help, Commissioner Blau?
That's a very creative answer, not very logical. I mean, to tell you the truth, you want to have terrible VOCs? Go to a sugar beet plant. I mean, I took a tour one time, and after about 5 minutes, I had to leave, or otherwise I was going to be deathly ill. But at any rate, creative answer, but doesn't help me. Thanks anyway.
Mr. Chair, your mic is off.
Ms. Macon,
Yes, Chair Farini.
how are you there?
I'm okay.
Were you able to track that down for me?
Well, I Googled the San Ynez River Water Conservation District. They are not a customer of the district.
Okay.
I don't have any more information regarding this project and the district.
That's really all I needed to know.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Park.
I'd like to make a scheduling suggestion for you, Chair Farini, and one which I think you probably have internalized anyway. And that is the tea leaves tell me as I read them that we're ready for deliberations. And I think we would be wise to get into deliberations and see if we can deal with this matter before we break for lunch, because we may not need to break for lunch and come back. It's
Okay, I'm ready when you are. So why don't you lead us off in deliberations then?
okay. Now, I always ask, is it in my district? And you always tell me that every cannabis grow is in my district. But whose district is this?
It's the 4th district. It says on the staff report.
Okay, well, I'll leave off because it's close to the 3rd district. I think it's across the street. But I will lead off. Ms. Cosart Daly has raised a lot of interesting arguments. And I appreciate seeing her here on Zoom. And I like seeing young people making presentations. I think you made a good presentation. These emissions issues, you kind of have to break them down into odor, effect on the taste of vines nearby. And we've kind of discussed that subject a lot. I kind of submit we ought to have a 1,500-foot buffer. And then now we're kind of hearing about VOCs in general and contributing to the ozone layer, even though plants suck in carbon dioxide and emit oxygen mainly. And I think that we'll never really get there as that being a deciding issue in our planning commission determinations, because with a few years of experience in this, it hasn't been something that's worked real well. What's worked well is to realize that standing in front of these projects and asking for their denial is like standing in front of a freight train. So you're better off trying to get what you can before the project is heard. And maybe if this gets appealed and you want more, you can do that. But I don't personally feel the need to address those issues any further personally. I know that they were litigated extensively in the Busy Bee Organics litigation and the lengthy decision by Judge Anderley. So I'm not inclined to get into that. I look at this project, it on the ranking of various cannabis projects we've seen, it would kind of be at the top or near the top for most benign. And so with all that being said, I would be willing to support the project with that little modification I asked for, that the landscaping for next to the cultivation be replaced by appropriate native vegetation, such as, for example, and I listed some things. And otherwise, I would move for approval with the staff recommendations.
Thank you, Commissioner Park. Commissioner Bradley?
I generally concur with Commissioner Park, and I feel personally bad for the Hames because I had a lovely conversation with them about the scariness of cannabis in our communities. And the questions posed today by Commissioner Blau echoes things that I've been saying all along, like, well, wait a second. You got a property in an ag zone, not just a little ag zone. You got big parcels in an ag zone, and a mushroom farm can move in, a guava farm, a sugar beet farm, in Commissioner Blau's experience. So ag is a little bit risky if what you really want is a rural ranchette. Then you should be looking at a rural residential zoning for your, residential protections. So I think that in this case, it's protections. So I think that in this case, it's really easy to support. And I apologize to the Hames, but in the continuum of cannabis cases and understanding everything that the county's gone through from the time that they certified that EIR to amending the ordinance a couple times, and us being in the very middle of it, in the very V ditch of trying to help the public decipher it, I think this is an excellent project. I mean, you know, as Ms. Macon pointed out, it's like 10% of the whole site. It's a very small grow site. They're willing to do some screening for the applicant, the solar array, you know, they could do even if they weren't doing cannabis. And with the other thing that speaks volumes to me is that we don't have vintners here complaining about it. Okay, so this is a co-grow. I was anxious to get the Sunstone case in front of us, so I was glad to see Mr. Kabukos at today's hearings, because here is a vintner that's going to do cannabis right next door, and this is the very compatibility thing that we struggled with for like 18 months. So all of those things considered, I believe that the applicant has done a very good job. I also understand that they did really reach out to the neighborhood aggressively, and it might just be that, you know, the appellants came to it a little bit later. And so for whatever would have worked out, I'm not sure that there's any skin on the, what is it? There's any meat on the bone left for the applicant to have offered. You know, I wouldn't want them to make it less than 3.94 acres and grow. So anyway, all of that said, I'm inclined to support the case. And I would even second Commissioner Park's motion, but maybe I'll just leave that for the home district commissioner.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bridley. I'm gonna jump in here a little bit. I think Ms. Cosart-Daly made many good points, and as Commissioner Cooney would say, many fair arguments here. But there's been a lot of precedent set on all of these projects, and it does stem back to the LUP, right? And initially, the Planning Commission recommended to the Board of Supervisors that these projects be under the CUP. The Board of Supervisors changed that way back when, however many years ago. Not that I hold a grudge, but that's how our table's been set. These are LUPs. We have very limited ability to interact on those. Every time we have tried, the board has come back, struck down what we've tried to do, and actually changed the projects in a direction probably opposite of where we were trying to go. So that's one precedent. As for the Hames, I feel equally, I guess, bad for them, just like the neighborhoods and the people up in Sabata Canyon. You know, we just weren't given much ability to limit these projects and look at those points that Ms. Cosart-Daly has made and that Mr. Hames made. It just seems to be out of our purview. I think the other discussion topic that came up was the water use. And it's interesting to me, and I think Commissioner Blau continues to make this point, is they could go and put in 90 acres of vineyard, and that would definitely have more impact than them taking out their 2 or 3 acres of vineyards and adding 2 or 3 acres of cannabis. It is not going to be significant. You know, Mr. Hoffman is a seasoned hydrogeologist, and he is licensed by the state of California, and I respect his opinion. So I too am ready to move forward with this project, but like most cannabis projects, it's with reservation, because I think there are things we could have done to much bigger projects that would have a bigger impact. But we don't have a lot of tools in our tool belt here. Okay, Commissioner Blau.
Yeah, you're very kind to the appellant, and that's probably why you're so well liked. I don't I don't have the same opinion. I think this appeal is completely without merit, to tell you the truth. I find all the arguments pretty disingenuous, to tell you the truth. I'm not going to disagree with Commissioner Park or you on the screening, although I don't understand why we screen an agricultural grow. Do we do that with broccoli? Do we do that with cauliflower? I mean, quite frankly, your strawberry crops, I think, are about the ugliest damn things you could look at, with the plastic that goes on there before you plant the little seedlings. I don't get it. You know, if you think you need to screen a cannabis crop and the applicant is willing to do that, so be it. The only argument that had any merit whatsoever for me was that of odor, and I've said that from the beginning. But in this case, when I see the staff presentation that they're putting all of the carbon filter systems and doing more than what actually required, I'm going like, great, that's perfect for them to do that. And the worst part of the odors are in greenhouses with the carbon filtration systems. All the other issues, the screening, the water, it's just disingenuous. I mean, I don't get it. So willing to support the project. If the applicant and the motion maker wants to modify the screening from the agricultural land, as long as the applicant's willing, so be it. If they were to disagree and not want to do that, I would support that. But so I'm ready to make the vote.
Thank you, Commissioner Blau. Commissioner Cooney?
Mr. Chair, yes, I appreciate always listening to my fellow commissioners' approaches to everything, including yours, setting out the background against which we have to decide these cases. And I would have done that also. I do think that staff does a good job, in this case, an excellent job of following the rules that have been set out by the Board of Supervisors, and gave us really clear authority to grant this particular application and unfortunately to deny the appeal. I also feel sorry for the Hames, surrounded by an agricultural use that can be offensive. However, there is evidence that's been presented that these are exceptional neighbors in terms of their approach on the potential invasiveness of odor from cannabis. And I think the best thing that could be said for the appellants is that they do have sensitive neighbors, and in the long run, that may be the best of all solutions. As far as the Planning Commission is concerned, I don't think there's much opportunity for denial of this project. I do think procedurally, it was unfortunate that we were asked to consider what I think was an important document at the last minute, too late to be able to bring it forth. But the solution was to bring forth the author of that document, and he gave extensive testimony regarding the water issues, which I think are material and we should keep in mind, even though the process established by the state for groundwater sustainability is slow and trudging and on the way. We can look ahead and say, hey, we're short of water, we're in a drought. Is this project going to make it worse? And I'm satisfied with Mr. Hoffman's testimony that this is a good place for the growing of cannabis. So all that said, I would have considered a continuance had not Mr. Hoffman appeared, but he did. He's the best evidence. I disagree with Ms. Cosart-Daly that we don't have evidence in the file. We do. We may not have a lot of graphs and and notes, but we have plenty on which to base our opinion today. So I will support a motion to approve.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Park is over there, his hand's down now. All right. So if this is my district.
Chair Farini, if I could just weigh in, I think Commissioner Park made a motion to approve the project. I think what's correct is to make a motion to deny the appeal. And I think that's what he had in mind. And I just wanted to, if that's the motion, and I think Commissioner Ridley wanted to second that, I just wanted to correct the record. It's not a motion to approve the project, it's a motion to deny the appeal, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. Secretary Wilson. You're muted.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thank you. I apologize, Mr. Chair, if I interrupted before you added anything to deliberations. Couple items for the Commission to consider. On page 2 of the staff report, we outlined the recommended motions for the Planning Commission to consider. I think Commissioner Park was referring to those. I could be wrong, but there are 4 recommended actions that deal with the deny the appeal, seek with findings, and grant de novo approval. However, the reason why I raised my hand was if there's a motion to approve the project and amend that condition, staff is ready to present some language to the commission to consider for amending that condition related to landscaping that Commissioner Park has indicated. And it's similar to what we've done in other projects, but before we made a formal motion or we took action on that motion, I wanted to provide time for staff to present that language. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. With that, let's go to staff. Ms. Vosper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Mr. Dargle. We've prepared some modification to condition 15 from the staff report, and we're bringing that up onto the screen now. So as you can see on the screen, condition 15 would be modified to state that the applicant shall implement the landscape and screening plan as modified at the Planning Commission hearing on 10/13 of 2021 to include native landscape screening and confirmed by P&D staff. That is the extent of the changes that we have included.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dargle. Commissioner Park, does that meet your view, or would you like it more detailed? Commissioner.
Yeah. I just, with the sun going in my screen, I can't see the cursor, then I can't figure out how to unmute. So I did. So I'm going to answer a question with another question. I think that that's all right, but to be lawyerly, which means to be a pain in the ass. The native landscaping does, coastal redwoods are native up at Santa Cruz and Humboldt County and all that. They're just not native here in inland central California. And so if you felt the need to be more specific, one could put to include native inland central California landscape screening. Although frankly, I think everyone understands that when we talk about native landscape, we're talking about something that's, something in our area. But staff, do you want something more specific or not? I don't really care.
Let's leave it at that. And I think staff can always refer back to today's hearing if they need.
That's good.
I think the key thing is that, that the applicant, both the applicant personally and the applicant's agent understand this very well. And I think they'll want to do this, and I'm going to rely on them unless somebody complains at some later date. I think they'll do it right.
Okay, Commissioner Park, do you want to make the motion?
Sure. I move that we deny the appeal and approve the project de novo pursuant to the recommendations made by staff on the staff report, including the revision of the landscape screening that we just addressed.
Okay, second. And Mr. Villalobos.
Commissioner Cooney.
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Park.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye.
Chair Farini.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. All right, I believe that concludes the items on today's agenda, and we may now go about our day. See you next time.
Just one procedural issue, maybe for the Secretary Wilson. Do we ever cancel the hearing of the 27th?
We did last week, yeah.
I thought that we had deferred it to this week.
I was going to raise the same question when I looked at your projection report that you sent, the last one that Mr. Villalobos sent out. It was still on there. So just to make sure, I'll go ahead and move that we cancel that hearing.
Commissioner Bradley?
I'll second.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Mr. Villalobos?
Commissioner Cooney.
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Park.
Aye.
Commissioner Blau.
Aye.
And Chair Farini.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Okay.
Now we can go. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job, Chair Farini. Thank you.
Bye-bye.